I usually like to play games with headphones. I like to be able to hear all the sounds in the game, get a better sense of all the little atmospheric flourishes they put in. I like to experience that as much as possible because a lot of the time I feel like that gets brushed under the rug. So needless to say, I kept my headphones on when I looked up Hellblade to watch a little bit of the gameplay. It was a game I'd been interested in for some time, but I didn't know too much about it. I just knew that it involved some sort of exploration of mental illness. My immediate reaction when I heard the game, well, I'm not quite sure what it was, but I wasn't comfortable. I was very unhappy. It reminded me of some things that I like to not remember. See, the game has voices playing a lot of the time, most of the time. Whispering in your ear, it's kind of an interesting effect where it goes around your head, or they try to make it sound that way. To make it sound like you're surrounded by these things, like they're really crawling inside. And I didn't like that. I didn't like how that felt. But I decided still that I wanted to buy it, that I wanted to try it out and play it because it seemed interesting to me. But I just thought that I would play it without headphones on, that I would avoid that part. So I went out, bought the game, and as I'm buying it, the cashier says to me, "Hey, make sure to play it with headphones. That's the best way to play it." And I went, okay. I wanted to play it that way originally, but then I heard the voices and I went, no, not doing that. Then I turned on the game and the game says, it's best to play this with headphones. I'm sure this doesn't seem like a big deal to most, and it shouldn't. But for me, it was one of those rare instances where a piece of media hits a little bit too close to home for me. For a long time, I was like this. I didn't have all these things, all these symptoms, but I certainly had some of them. I became increasingly paranoid. I started to think that I was cursed by something. I know that sounds weird and crazy. At least I assume it does. That's how I think of it. Regardless, one of the things I experienced were these sort of voices. These things in my head that to me didn't feel like me. Felt like something else had got its way in there. It became harder and harder for me to think straight. My grades dropped about 30 to 40%. I couldn't sleep properly. I was always tired. I felt constantly sick. And I had no idea why it was happening. So maybe it wasn't that weird that I thought I was cursed. When you start to lose your grip on reality, unreal explanations start to seem all the more likely. But that's what I thought. I thought it was some sort of evil thing, something bad inside of me that was there. And I didn't know why. I thought I must have done something to deserve it, that I must have done something wrong. Now, I went to therapy for that, and it helped me. And eventually these things dissipated, these symptoms I've talked about. But I guess in the back of my mind, there's always been a little fear. Right now, I'm pretty happy. But would it remain that way if this came back? What if now knowing that it's not a curse doesn't change anything? Because that never should have seemed like a logical explanation in the first place. What if it seems like a logical explanation again? That's what I realized when I was buying that game, turning it on, staring at the screen telling me to put in the headphones and listen to it, to re-experience it on some level. It was like it was asking me, can you do it? So I decided to give it a shot. I'd say the voices are the most compelling aspect of Hellblade. Maybe that's just because of my own personal experience. I know the game does a lot to also show some visual hallucinations. But to me, what they really nailed were the voices. Sometimes they mock Senua. Other times they encourage her. Sometimes they warn her. Sometimes they try to protect her. Other times they just laugh at her. As I already said, the voices, they try to make it sound like they're coming from all around you. It works well. Then there's the narrator who often speaks into one ear and will tell you some information about Senua, about where she's been, about where she's going. And it gives you this weird sense of distance from Senua, while also making you feel closer to her. Because this isn't a player character in the sense that you're supposed to feel like you are her. You're meant to feel distanced. Sometimes she'll even look and talk directly to you, or at least seem to. And you, the player, take on the role of the voices, as though you are one of them, looking into what's happening to her. To me, for these reasons, and the way that sometimes the visuals line up with those voices, and the way that it just creates this sort of sensory overload, it's one of the most scary games I've ever played, probably the most scary, and for sure the most affecting, the one that I connected to the most, at least insofar as me feeling the things the character is supposed to feel. Because at times it was like reliving things. But overall, it wasn't that bad. Playing through it, I started to feel more and more like maybe I didn't have to be so scared of this thing. So scared of this thing that had happened to me years ago. That maybe if it did come back, I'd actually be able to deal with it. That maybe if that was a part of me, I could handle it. I know obviously there's a big difference between having something and playing a video game about that thing. And I don't mean to speak lightly of people's experiences with this thing, but for me, this game was healing in a way. It's the closest I could get to looking the thing I was afraid of right in the face and just pressing forward. So for me, very quickly, this has become more than just a video game. For me, there was something decidedly therapeutic about it. And the reason I'm making this is because I think it's important to talk about these things, about these mental things we experience that we think are so outlandish and weird that nobody could possibly understand. From my experience, that just isn't accurate. A lot of people can understand, even if a lot also might not. If you're anything like me, maybe this game will serve to help you work through some things as well. And maybe if you're somebody who finds it hard to relate to the idea of somebody dealing with psychosis, this game could also be useful for you too. I think it's important to speak about the things that make us afraid, that have scared us deeply. What really helped me was the therapy and people I cared about supporting me. But at that time, I just felt so alone. Felt like nobody in the world could ever understand. Until eventually I just couldn't handle bottling it up like that anymore. And I talked to some of the people closest to me, some of the people I trusted, and they helped me find a counselor whose style of therapy matched up with what I was experiencing very well. So if you're one of those people, if you're maybe like I was and experiencing some of those things, I know I'm just some random guy on the internet, but I encourage you to do just that, to talk to the people you care about, who you trust, and try to find some help. If even one person does that because of this video, then it's definitely worth making it.